Welcome to the Airlock IAM 8.6 release video. Mike and I are going to present the most notable features of the release. In this video, we are going to discuss the shown features. The video has chapter markers, so you can easily jump to the desired topic of interest. We implemented a new configuration automation feature called Modifications for configuration snippets. This feature extends the config automation capabilities that were introduced in version 8.4. If you are not yet familiar with config snippets, we recommend consulting the documentation or watching the 8.4 release video. First, let us briefly review configuration snippets in version 8.4 and 8.5 to ensure a common understanding. Let us assume we have a base configuration into which a snippet is imported. A snippet is essentially a portion of a configuration that is stored in a separate YAML file. The base configuration could, for example, be a valid IAM configuration, while the snippet might contain a list of plugins that add an additional second factor to the base configuration. To import the snippet into the base configuration, the corresponding CLI command can be used, or the snippet can be imported through the config editor. The resulting configuration consists of the base configuration with the plugins from the snippet added to it. However, the plugins from the snippet are not yet connected to the plugins defined in the base configuration. Establishing these connections previously required either a script using the IAM CLI commands or manual steps in the config editor. We use the term modifications to describe such operations, such as connecting plugins or applying other changes in the configuration. As a result, up to IAM 8.5, snippets were not fully self-contained, since the required modifications were not included in the snippet itself. This limitation has been addressed with IAM 8.6. Starting with 8.6, modifications can also be part of the snippet. In addition to plugins, a snippet can now define a list of modifications too. The list of modifications can be understood as a recipe describing how the snippet should be applied. The modifications are applied automatically when the snippet is imported into the base configuration. This can be done using the import snippet CLI command or by loading the snippet into the config editor. As a side note, the config editor also supports dragging and dropping a snippet directly onto the plugin tree. With snippets that include modifications and well-designed set of snippets, this provides an efficient way to compose IAM configurations with minimal manual interaction. Let's look at the simple example. On the left, the beginning of a base configuration is shown. It shows the authentication settings within the main settings tree. The snippet shown in the middle contains a minimal version of the FIDO settings plugins. This snippet could now be imported into the base config and connected manually. With IAM 8.6, you can now add a list of modifications. In this example, the first modification connects the FIDO settings to the main authentication settings. The second modification connects the database connection from the base configuration to the FIDO repository plugin. And finally, the third modification uses the setSimple property modification to simply set the relying party ID. This is a simple string property and not about connecting plugins. As mentioned, the modifications are applied when using the config import snippet command or when uploading or dropping the snippet in the config editor. To point out another important feature of modifications, let's look at another example. Here, the base configuration is not shown. What you see on the left is a simplified snippet. The dashed box on top represents all the plugins in the snippet, and the snippet contains two modifications. In this example, the shown modifications connect FIDO-related self-services to the list of protected self-services in the login app. Compared to the previous example, there is an additional attribute called fail on error with the value set to false. This tells IAM not to abort snippet import if there is a problem with the modifications. If, for example, the first modification fails because the destination plugin does not exist, it is just ignored. This may be useful to make snippets more robust. The snippet would work both for base configurations with and without such protected self-services. The following types of modifications are available in IAM 8.6. The first three are about connecting plugins to plugin properties, lists, and maps. setSimple property and setSimple list properties are used to add or change simple properties such as strings, booleans, numbers, or alike. This covers all property types that are not plugins. There are more options available in the modifications. Apart from the discussed fail on error attribute, other attributes define where to insert elements in the list or map, what context or environment to use, and so on. Modifications are very powerful, but the set of modifications are not complete in that they do not cover all thinkable config manipulations. Please check out the documentation for further details on all supported modifications. Let's sum up the most important properties of modifications. So, why modifications? What are modifications for? Modifications are thought to simplify config composition, both manual and automated. With modifications, the plugins of a snippet and the recipe specified used, it can be kept in the same place. Modifications can make complex scripting obsolete. Because modifications are structured and part of a snippet, they can be automatically upgraded to new IAM versions to a certain extent. This makes upgrades easier. The main use cases for modifications are the modularization of complex configurations and easy config composition given a set of snippets designed for usage within a given base configuration. Technically, modifications can be characterized as follows. They are an optional part of snippets. Snippets without modifications, of course, still work. A snippet may consist only of modifications. In other words, the list of plugins may be empty. While supported modification types are not functionally complete, they are a powerful toolset for config manipulations. Snippets, including the modifications, are either fully imported or not imported at all. In other words, the snippet import is atomic. Modifications are supported both by the import snippet CLI and the config editor. There are also limitations that apply to modifications. As mentioned, they do not cover all possible config manipulations. For example, you cannot set a parent plugin. Automatic config migration is only possible to a limited extent. While simple changes, such as property name changes or type name changes, are automatically migrated, more complex changes may require manual adaptations to the modifications. Remember that starting with IAM 8.5, changes to the YAML config schema are documented in the release notes. We aim to keep changes that may make manual changes necessary minimal. If a snippet is modified in the config editor, changes to the plugins are not automatically applied to the modifications. This is especially important when you change the ID of a plugin. Keep in mind that plugin IDs are your API and they must be maintained by you. Well-chosen plugin IDs help keeping this API stable and makes modifications more readable. IAM does not provide a standard snippet library. We may do so in future. Snippets and thus also modifications still need to be created manually. Please give us feedback and help us improve this feature. In this section of the video, I am going to present several new features related to end-user authentication. Short-lived QR codes are a new Airlock 2FA feature. QR codes can be used for login, in approval steps, and for the enrollment of Airlock 2FA devices. However, QR codes can also be targeted by phishing attacks. QR code phishing, often referred to as squishing, is an increasingly common threat. The risk is particularly significant when QR codes remain valid for a longer period of time. This new feature introduces short-lived QR codes that are automatically refreshed every few seconds. With this additional security measure in place, squishing attacks become significantly more difficult. The configuration of the new feature is done on each affected step. It is not part of the global Airlock 2FA settings. Note that the used mobile app needs to support the feature and therefore needs to be based on an up-to-date SDK. At the time of the IAM 8.6 release date, the Airlock 2FA app is not yet ready. It is planned to be updated in summer 2026. Further, the feature has not yet been implemented for the username-less QR login step. Another Airlock 2FA improvement affects the format of the login ID. The login ID is a 6-digit number shown on the login screen and on the mobile app when an Airlock 2FA push message is displayed. It can be used to verify that the push message really originated from the login session. With Airlock IAM 8.6, the format of the login ID can now be configured. If, for example, you think that 4 alphanumeric characters offer better usability than 6 digits, you may now easily configure that. If, just to make another example, all your end users happen to be computer scientists, you can make it look like this. Further, a new config option can now ensure that device names chosen by the end users are unique among their devices. This helps reduce friction during login and in helpdesk calls. Last but not least, the REST API used to create Airlock 2FA activation letters now also contains the app activation URL. This allows for more custom enrollment scenarios. 2 improvements have been made in IAM's FIDO passkey relying party implementation. First, to maximize interoperability, the require resident key config flag has been replaced by a selection offering more options. It is automatically migrated. Second, the FIDO registration settings got a new config property called Prevent Double Registration. It helps maximizing compatibility with browsers and operating systems. It especially helps with Android devices in conjunction with authenticators communicating over NFC. IAM now supports a new password hash plugin to provide maximum password hash security. It is called the Argon 2ID password hash plugin. It is resistant against both GPU attacks and side channel attacks. It is the recommended state-of-the-art hash function for password hashing. The hash function can be parameterized to meet different requirements. The default parameters are those recommended by OWASP, the well-known Open Web Application Security project. By definition, cryptographically strong password hash functions consume a lot of memory and require a lot of CPU cycles. So before using it in a large customer base, try it out and benchmark it using your target hardware. The default password repository plugin supports migrating hash functions on the fly. It rehashes the passwords using the new hash function whenever the end user logs in. Please refer to the documentation of the property legacy hash function in the default password repository plugin for further information. Scriptable validation in the user registration self-service. Self-registration workflows often require very specific and custom validation logic. So far, this required writing custom Java code. This can now also be achieved by directly using script code in the configuration. The new feature allows custom validation of user data in the self-registration flow. It takes user input and also additional information into account. It allows to provide fine-grained output to provide optimal feedback to the user and thus achieve an optimal user experience. The feature is configured in the plugin user data registration step in the validators list within the advanced settings. The example screenshot shows where to configure the Scriptable Validator plugin. The Scriptable Validator plugin configuration itself consists of the actual script code performing the validation and a list of plugins providing additional input. For example, the script gets the following JSON structure as input. Here is the entered username and the password, the context data entered by the user, and additional data added by IAM. In this example, request information such as the client IP and geolocation attributes provided to the script. The script code itself, which is written in the Lua programming language, can then validate the input data. This may also include calling another system for validation. The IAM documentation shows you how to do that. The script code may then produce an output structure like the one shown on the right. It provides the web UI or any other client with validation error information to be displayed to the end user. Accessibility is about designing digital products so that people with disabilities can use them effectively. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, is an international standard developed by the World Wide Web Consortium for Digital Products. It establishes the design requirements for web applications to ensure effective use by individuals with visual, auditory, motor, or cognitive impairments. Level AA is the widely accepted compliance target. In practical terms, for web applications like the IAM login app, the focus is on screen readers, keyboard navigation, contrast, and the structure of information on web pages. As said, Level AA is referred by accessibility laws in various jurisdictions, such as the EU accessibility requirements. Compliance not only mitigates legal risks, but also supports procurement eligibility. By enhancing readability, improving error handling, increasing interaction targets, and so on, WCAG significantly improves the user experience, particularly in critical flows like the login process. For instance, consider the IAM default login screen. To ensure accessibility, the markup code must be structured in a specific manner. This is particularly crucial for effective use with screen readers employed by individuals with visual impairments. The most significant aspects are so-called landmarks and input purposes, attributes providing descriptions for the intended purpose of each input element, to offer means to jump to desired content blocks on a page, names and descriptions enhance comprehension of the meaning of elements, proper focus management and the ability to navigate the page using a keyboard make it easier or even possible to use a page. So how did we enhance this feature in Airlock IAM? The IAM login app now conforms to WCAG 2.2 level AA with a few exceptions. I'll also provide a crucial disclaimer shortly. By default, new or non-styled IAM instances are automatically WCAG compliant. However, Certain aspects, such as input purposes for UI elements, require specific configuration. Not all the details of the login apps are accessible. Some aspects are inherently inaccessible, like scanning QR codes. Notably, the temp blocking feature has not been made accessible. We successfully underwent the review by the Access for All, a reputable Swiss competence center and certification body specializing in digital accessibility. How can I enable WCAG for existing customized login app UIs? So I'll just give an overview. Please refer to the documentation for detailed instructions. To enable the feature, go to the Login App Design Kit configuration and activate it. Then you have to ensure that your index HTML file is WCAG compliant. In custom HTML templates, add landmark roles, for example. Configure input purposes where necessary, especially for custom UI elements. Review and adapt JavaScript customizations as the DOM structure differs slightly from in the WCAG mode. As mentioned earlier, new non-styled IAM instances are WCAG compliant by default. Now comes the mentioned disclaimer. Applying WCAG means working with the Login App Design Kit. As you were informed in January 2026, the Login App Design Kit will be replaced soon. More information about that is provided later in this video. Thus, if you choose to adapt existing UI customizations to be WCAG compliant, you may have to do this twice, once now and once when the migration to the new Login App Design Kit in a few releases from now. Our recommendation, if you can wait with WCAG compliant, then wait for the new Login App Design Kit. However, we gained a lot of experience when making the Login App compliant. The know-how is directly applied to the new Login App Design Kit, and the new Login App Design Kit will be compliant by design.
Hello everyone, also from my side. Today I'll be talking to you about the new things we've implemented for the Airlock Event Bus. Just to reiterate, the Airlock Event Bus has been very successful and many customers use it. It's been deployed in the admin app and login app, and it will give you events, for example, device events, factor usage events, account events. And since last release, there is also step events, so events that every step generates upon successful or failure completion of the step. And then you can use those events in subscribers, which will send out SMS, email messages, connect over REST, or even terminate sessions in the gateway. Now, there's one thing that we've heard from customers that they were not really happy with is that the Airlock Event Bus was just best effort and there was no guaranteed delivery. And now we've changed that and we've improved the Airlock Event Bus to be able to do reliable event delivery. So for every event that has been generated by Airlock IAM, we guarantee that with the new Event Bus, that event will also be delivered. So how do we do that? What we're seeing here is the pattern that we have today, and I will tell you on how we evolve that into what is called an outbox pattern. Outbox pattern is a standard architecture, and I'll explain just in a few words how it works. So what you see on the left-hand side is the event bus in Login App and Admin App that generates the event, and then you have the event subscriber that connect to the bus and collect those events and do whatever they are configured to do, so send out email, SMS, and so forth. Now, on the left-hand side in the event bus, we have an additional thing, and that's called the Outbox DB. So once you enable reliable events, the Outbox DB will be written, and all the events configured will be written to that database. There is a new process called the Outbox processor that scans through the database for new events, and if there are new events, it will process them and forward them to a message broker. Currently, we're supporting Azure Event Hub and Kafka. So those are the only message brokers that will connect and that will profit from the reliable events. Now, your service, whatever that may be, can connect to the message broker and collect events from there, and will guarantee that every event is sent exactly one time to the message broker. Just so we're clear about that, there is a system boundary, and the system boundary is as depicted by the violet line. It's between the outbox processor, which is part of still of IAM, and the message broker. The message broker is under your control. You have to deploy it, and you can reuse an existing message broker, so there's no need to have a message broker that is specifically deployed for IAM. Now, on the configuration side, what do you need to do to take advantage of it? Well, on the top level of the login app and admin app, there is a new configuration for the outbox. There you have to configure the outbox repository, and you can decide on whether you want to include generic step results or not. Generic step results create quite a few events with every flow. So from a performance point of view, you're probably better off if you can turn that off. If you really require it, then you will have to take the load on the system. And the other thing you can do, you can add additional data, which is written to the outbox custom fields that you require for your particular use case. On the outbox side, the outbox process is configured in the service container. So it's a new service in the service container. It requires an outbox repository, and there you can define a list of event outbox processor services, basically a list of Azure Message Broker connectors and a list of Kafka Message Broker connectors if you want to connect to multiple buses, either from one or the other of the technologies. That's really up to you. So this is how we made it possible for events from Airlock IAM to be reliably sent to other systems. Let's leave the events and go to OpenID Connect. It's probably not unexpected for you if you already heard this type of webinar before. OpenID Connect, every release gets some new functionality. And this time I'm going to focus a little bit on the scope translations. Scope translations are important for user experience, and we have them in the authentication flow. The local consent step will expose the scopes, and even when the user accepted that scope and some additional information. And the problem was with the translations of those scopes. The same holds true for protected self-services. There we have it in the OAuth 2 session management and the OAuth 2 consent management. So what's new and different? Well, we've just cleaned up the way we've implemented it, and now there's a very clear translation strategy on how translations are applied. If you have a server-side configuration for translations, then the server-side translations will always win. If there is no server-side translation, then we'll check for client-side translations, those that you generate with the SDK, and therefore with client-side translations, what you can do is you can prefix pages and use those page prefixes, for example, in different local consent steps, so the same scope gets translated differently if your use case requires that. If you haven't done either one of those, then we'll fall back to the technical scope name as a fallback, so there's always something that is going to be displayed, it's never empty. And the nice thing about the revamp was that now we're doing real-time updates, so if you change the browser language, then translations will also change immediately, including the scopes. Any other updates, for example, if you change something on the server-side translation or client-side translation, still require a page refresh, otherwise they won't be displayed. Then we've changed a few things in OAuth that may also be worth notice. The token exchange now supports list claims. Why do we do that? If, for example, you have a subject or actor token that contains roles as a list and not just as a string with separate roles in there, then you now can reuse that list into a claim of the exchanged token without problems. Tokens issued by Airlock IAM now must have limited validity. We had some problems on the database with unlimited validity, so we just fixed it, and we provide an auto migration. If you have unlimited validity tokens, they will be migrated to 10 years maximum validity to alleviate the problem. For those that use dynamic client registration, a pain point was that there was no way on how to actually delete a client. Now, when you create a client, we return the tech client ID, and the tech client ID can be used as a key in the API of the admin app. And through the REST API of the admin app, you now can delete such clients. So you should be able to better automate these types of tasks. We've added support for Boolean values in access and ID tokens. And last but not least, we made the client ID optional when authenticating with private key shots. Here we also had reports from customers that told us that there is third-party software out there that if you're using private key shot, you're not able to supply a client ID. If you do, then the authentication will fail. So those customers should no longer have a problem. The client ID is now optional. Let's leave OAuth and OpenID Connect and move on to some various new features. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the SBOM, the software bill of materials. So the software bill of materials is a structured file that contains all the dependency that Airlock IAM uses and that allows you for vulnerability scanning and license compliance and other purposes to figure out if everything is correct and in order. The SBOM right now is delivered through the dev zone. So on the download page, you will find two additional entries. One entry is for the Docker container, and the other entry is for the self-contained application. Why is there two files? Well, the Docker container also contains an operating system, which adds additional dependencies that we don't have in the self-contained application, and that's why there are two files. And the good news is for customers that don't intend to move to 8.6 very quickly, we're also deploying the SBOM capability to the next round of bug fix releases. So sometime this year, you'd be seeing SBOM on the download page for 8.3.6, 8.4.4, and 8.5.3. One more feature that we added is the DB schema version is now written to the database. So there's a separate table and we're keeping the DB schema version there. The reason for that is that we want to support validation in the future. One of the most obvious validations is that when you're upgrading DB schemas from one schema version to the next, that we actually can check on whether the past DB schema was in the correct version and that the upgrades are applied in the correct order. This should alleviate some problems with the upgrade processes, and we hope that this will help you in the future. Then I have great news for customers that have very large configurations. The configurator validator performance is now up to 20 times faster. So you should see a notable increase in performance when you use to validate large configuration. Last but not least, I wanted to reiterate the Microsoft is deprecating its Microsoft Exchange Online method of authentication. They're no longer supporting basic auth. This was announced for end of March this year. Now it's being pushed back to December 2026. But as you maybe already know, we've added support for the OAuth 2 authentication in the SMTP email server plugin. And we recommend that if you're using Microsoft Exchange Online, that you migrate rather quickly to the new authentication method. We've also already provided that functionality in the last bug fix release that we published earlier this year. Deprecations. Since we're already talking about deprecations, here's some more information that I wanted to share with you. We've removed the support for Ubuntu 16.04, which is an operating system that's already 10 years old. So that shouldn't pose much of a problem. And we've also removed support for Postgres 13, where the community support ended in November 25. So you will not get any support for Postgres 13, and we've kicked it out of the product. If you're not sure on whether your operating system and database are actually supported, here's the link into our documentation. You'll find all the supported operating systems and databases listed here. So this was it from my side. I'll now hand over to Mark again. He has a few more informations for you.
In January 2026, we informed all our customers and partners about the upcoming replacement of the Login Up Design Kit. What is this announcement about, and what exactly is the Login Up Design Kit, sometimes also referred to as UI SDK? The Login Up Design Kit is used to change the look and feel of the Login Up web application. This is the UI your end users interact with. It is also used to adapt text elements and translations. Further, it is used to add custom UI logic to the web front end. The Login Up Design Kit is used by practically all IAM customers. The vast majority of customers uses custom JavaScript for customizing. With this in mind, it is really very, very likely that the announced change affects your IAM project. Why do we have to replace the Login Up Design Kit in the first place? Let's explain this by looking at what happened. The first IAM login web frontend was based on JSP templates. They were supported until IAM 8.0 plus nearly 2 years of regular support. With IAM 7.4 some years ago, we published the first version of the new Angular-based UI together with the Login Up Design Kit. Today, at 8.6, we are about here. Now, some months ago, Google announced a change in Angular 22 that will break with the Login Up Design Kit. Because of that, we started analyzing what to do about this about a year ago. We found out that the Login Up Design Kit must be replaced entirely and started with the implementation of a new version of it. We expect the new version to be ready about in spring 2027. This is according to our current plans, and they are still subject to change. So don't really rely on that exactly. With the publication of the new design kit, today's design kit will remain supported for the regular period of 21 months. After that, customers must be migrated to the new design kit. Because of the nature of the changes in Angular, there is no way to make the two design kit versions compatible. Thus, you will have to redo the UI customizations for the new Login Up Design Kit. Be aware that you are most probably affected by the change. Plan for redoing UI customizings as early as possible. If you need help, contact us. We will also provide more information with the upcoming releases and in the Login Up Design Kit documentation. As usual, we conclude the video with general release information. IAM 8.6 is a minor release, meaning it doesn't break existing features. However, if you're using new features, you may need to make some manual changes. Regardless, please read the required upgrades section in the release notes within the documentation. Even though it's not strictly necessary when using only existing features, we strongly recommend fully applying the database schema upgrade. It's a low-risk update that's beneficial for future upgrades. The schema upgrade also creates a table that stores the version of the database schema. This helps automate database schema upgrades and makes upcoming schema upgrade scripts more robust. As usual, the release notes, including the changelog, deprecation announcement, and required actions, can be found in the IAM documentation at docs.airlock.com/IAM/latest. This information is located in the release and support section. Similarly, information on upgrading can be found in the documentation's installation and upgrade chapter. IAM 8.6 is scheduled for release at the end of March 2026. The release will be supported until end of next year. For detailed documentation on this specific release, visit docs.airlock.com/IAM/8.6. Information about Academy training programs can be found at www.airlock.com/academy. Please note the end of support dates for the last 3 releases. The next release is expected to be published at the end of September or beginning of October this year. With that, we wish you a lot of fun with the new release, and thanks for watching.